biggest lobby in Chicago is not big business. It's the nonprofits.
You don't get a blank check for $100 million in government.
$1 billion has been spent on community violence intervention programs like the Peacekeepers since 2017. Does this look like a nonprofit to you?
This violence interrupter program is a fraud. It's a scam.
These are underserved communities. They're improperly served. They're fraudulently served. I'm telling you, it's bullshit.
$1 billion. That's how much taxpayer money has been pumped into Chicago's so-called violence prevention program since 2017. Ghost employees, a podcast LLC getting violence prevention money, and a mayor who wants $100 million more with zero accountability. Let's get into it. So shout out to the Free Press, the YouTube channel. I'll link the story in the description box below so you guys can check this out. Let me show you guys what we're dealing with. After the George Floyd protests in 2020, cities across the country started shifting money away from police departments into what they called community violence intervention, CVI. The idea was simple. Hire people from the community, a lot of them former gang members, pay them a stipend, and have them go into the neighborhoods to mediate beefs before they turn into shootings. De-escalation. Conflict resolution. Meet violence where it lives and stop it before it starts. That's the pitch. In Chicago, the biggest version of this was the Peacekeepers program. It's state funded, $33 million this fiscal year alone. And it's run through nonprofits like Chicago Cred, which is co-founded by Obama's former education secretary and backed by the billionaire widow of Steve Jobs. Now check this out. Between 2027 and 2023, funding from these programs grew 15 times faster than the Chicago's police budget. We're talking over $1 billion being pumped into the system. On paper, that sounds like this may work, right? Get people who understand the streets to prevent violence from the inside. Nobody's arguing that concept. People who've been through it realize it was a mistake, talk to younger people, try to get them out of the situation, going into the communities to stop these things from happening. But here's where it all falls apart. When you pour $1 billion into a system with no oversight, no auditing, no accountability, what you get isn't violence prevention. What you get is a money grab. And the Free Press just went to Chicago to prove it. Let me show you what they found.
This has become a major industry. We're talking about millions of public and private dollars flowing through multiple layers of organizations, from state agencies and private foundations to major nonprofits to smaller subgrantees, and so on. I tried to follow the money trail for one nonprofit. So this is Aclavis? Aclavis is one of two nonprofits paid by the state to oversee Peacekeeper programs. It also distributes grants to other nonprofits in violence prevention. This is a group that their budget is $13.5 million, or was for 2023. 95% of Aclavis's budget is coming from public dollars. A lot of these addresses, they seem to just be people's houses. According to the tax filings, someone at this address was the head of an organization that got nearly $200,000 worth of violence prevention funds. We're in a neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. We're gonna go see if there's a violence prevention anything at this location. Okay, so this is supposed to be a group called I Said What I Said, and there's no way to get in. The doorbell's broken. Does this look like a nonprofit to you? His name was Alan Toussaint Werner. I looked up Werner's organization, I Said What I Said, which Aclavis classified as a 501c3, aka a nonprofit, but it's not one. What he's actually registered for with the state of Illinois is a business called I Said What I Said Podcast and Apparel, LLC. Werner's neighbor told me that he had never heard of a violence prevention group at that address. I called Werner, who told me that he is a community activist. But when I asked him about his connection to Aclavis and the money that went to I Said What I Said, he just hung up on me.
A podcast and apparel LLC receiving taxpayer-funded violence prevention grants. That's not a nonprofit. That's somebody's side hustle getting government money. When a reporter calls to ask about it, they hang up. That tells you everything that you need to know. Now here's what makes this worse. The organization distributing these grants has a $13.5 million budget. 95% of that is public dollars, taxpayer money. Your dollars. And where is that money going? To addresses that are just people's houses, to condos, to LLCs that have nothing to do with stopping violence. And when this organization got caught listing these businesses as 501c3s, is on their tax filings, which they're not, they called it a data entry error. Cool, but the problem is that same error appeared on their filings 3 years in a row. That is not an error, that's a pattern. This really sounds like the Feeding Our Future scam that happened back in Minnesota. The fake organizations, fake addresses, real taxpayer money disappearing. The names change, the city changes, but the fraud remains the same. You create an LLC, you slap a feel-good mission statement on it, get plugged into the grant pipeline, and collect checks while doing absolutely nothing. Nobody's watching, no one is auditing, nobody's asking any questions until a reporter from New York shows up and start knocking on doors in Chicago. Where is the local press in this story? I mean, it's kind of crazy that no one is reporting on this situation.
The truth about it, it's a good program. They just got some of the wrong people in play. There's some people that got the job, come out here, and they do what they supposed to do. You get me? They do what they supposed to do. And you got some out, a lot of them just out here ain't doing nothing.
So when you were a peacekeeper, what would you do?
We'll walk, hang with them, hang down there, hang at the curfews change, the little stove, we hang out, make sure everything is straight. All the way to the viaduct.
This was like your assignment as a peacekeeper, though.
Peacekeeper.
And so you were out here every day, or?
Every day.
Say your team is like 30 people for the peacekeepers.
Okay.
What % of them do you think are there just for the paycheck?
1/3. Yeah, but it's still a problem because it's not doing what you wanted to do.
How so?
Because they supposed to be doing your job.
And this is the most honest thing you're going to hear about this entire program. It's not going to be from the mayor or the governor, not from the spokesperson of the Peacekeepers, but from former gang members on the street who actually went out there and are doing the work. He said it plain. A third of his team was just collecting a check. They're not mediating. They're not preventing violence. They're not showing up when it matters. They're just getting paid. Now let's do the math. The Peacekeepers program received $33 million in state funding this fiscal year. Peacekeepers can earn up to $600 a week if a third of them are going ghost. Not showing up, basically just they sign up, they get their stipend, and they did nothing. That's potentially millions of dollars going to people who are not doing their job. And that's just the stipend money. That's not including the overhead, the administrative costs, the sub-grants floating into organizations that may or may not exist. And here's where it really bothers me. This man right here who's actually out there every day, he's actually being undermined by the people gaming the system around him. The real outreach workers, the ones who really care, the ones who put the effort in. They're watching a third of their team collect checks for doing nothing. And that makes the whole program look like a joke. Because from the outside, that's exactly what it looks like. You have over 1,000 peacekeepers across Chicago. A reporter went to multiple hotspots on the south side. And how many peacekeepers did she see? 0.
They're out consistently, so I'm sure they're hearing them several times a day. This is all considered O Block from 65th to 64th.
So we're in what you could call a hotspot of gang activity.
You're in the pots.
How many peacekeepers do you see right now?
None.
Real quick, if you like this type of content and you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, like and share and hype as well, as it all helps the channel. So we got to keep going because this does get worse.
It's not an open secret that these programs are scammed. There's a large industry of nonprofits in Chicago, and they make millions from this program. The biggest lobby in Chicago is not big business. It's the nonprofits, and they're using the blood flowing in the streets, demanding funding with no strings attached. There is no accountability for how the money is being flown into these programs. No accountability whatsoever.
Our reporting shows that $1 billion has been spent on community violence intervention programs like the Peacekeepers since 2017. Do you feel like it's making a difference?
CVI is being pushed by many who don't want to use it as an addition to law enforcement. They want to use it as an alternative to law enforcement. And this Peacekeepers approach is being pushed by many who don't have an understanding of law enforcement.
Now we're hearing this from a Chicago alderman, an elected official inside City Hall, calling this program a scam on camera, saying that the biggest lobby in the city isn't the corporations, it isn't the real estate developers, it's the nonprofits using, and I quote, the blood flowing in the streets to demand money with no strings attached. $1 billion since 2017. No accountability, no transparency whatsoever. And it gets worse because the cops, the people on the ground trying to solve crimes, are telling the leadership that these peacekeepers are actively hindering investigations. Think about that. The city is paying people to supposedly stop violence, or those same people now are interfering with the police trying to solve violent crimes.
Illinois leaders call them peacekeepers. violent interrupters meant to cool tensions in Chicago without relying on the police.
But now another one of these so-called peacekeepers is under arrest, and not for keeping the peace.
So on September 22nd, Chicago PD chased down a man behind the wheel of a stolen car. He ditched the vehicle, tried to run, and resisted arrest, but was ultimately taken down. Enter Chester Alexander, who reportedly introduced himself as a peacekeeper at the crime scene. But rather than stepping in to help defuse the situation, he allegedly jumped into the fray. According to a police report, Alexander ignored commands to step back. Instead, he squared up on a cop and started fighting, as you can see. He was arrested for aggravated battery of a police officer. Authorities also say he had 24 ecstasy pills in his pocket.
One peacekeeper was arrested for robbery and then used his phone calls from the police station to try to intimidate the victim and a witness into staying quiet. That's not violence intervention, that's organized crime with a government paycheck. And here's a question nobody in Chicago's leadership wants to answer. If you spend $1 billion on something and your own aldermen, your own police officers are calling a scam, why are you pushing for more money? Why the response to failure is always give us more money? Because the answer is obvious. This isn't about stopping crime, it's about the money.
So I'm glad you're here, because we're giving too much money to the wrong people with no accountability. I know it's hundreds of millions. I don't know the exact figure. I wish I did. But the mayor in this last budget cycle was proposing a so-called community safety fund where he wanted to spend $100 million. And we asked him on what? And he said, well, violence interruption. Can you be more specific? It's $100 million. You don't get a blank check for $100 million in government. It doesn't work that way. It's one of the reasons that his budget didn't pass, because of skepticism and suspicion that that money would be squandered. You can't do it when things are intentionally obfuscated and hidden behind, the red velvet curtain where nobody's allowed to peek. That's what's happening right now in Chicago, and that's very dangerous.
That's why that budget didn't pass. The mayor of Chicago, the man polling in single digits, walked into a budget meeting and asked for $100 million for a community safety fund. And when the alderman asked, what exactly is that money for? The answer was violence prevention. That's it. That's the answer. No breakdown, no line items, no measurable outcomes. Just trust me, bro. It's for safety. This is the same mayor who's been championing these programs, the same mayor who killed ShotSpotter, the gunshot detection technology that his own police superintendent, 60% of aldermen, and 70% of residents wanted to keep. The same mayor whose proposed budget didn't pass partly because the aldermen didn't trust where the money was going. And that's the real story here. Brandon Johnson didn't create this machine, but he's protecting it. He's feeding it. He is trying to expand it with a new tax on businesses, a head tax, to fund even more of it. An alderman just told us on camera that these things are being intentionally hidden behind a red velvet curtain. That's an elected official in his own city, in his own party, saying that the mayor is hiding where your money goes. And that budget didn't pass because of it. That should tell you everything.
Steve Robinson, whose family has donated more than $5.4 million to CVI organizations, including CRED, says that the drop in crime in Chicago should be credited not to these programs, but to the Chicago Police Department, which has stepped up its total arrest rates and clearance rates for most major crimes. And he says, given the money spent, Chicago should be able to see more of an impact.
Absolutely reject the statement, these are underserved communities. They're improperly served, they're fraudulently served. There's a whole bunch of reasons why it hasn't worked, but underserved is nonsense. The crime trend suggests that violence is going down more so in these neighborhoods where we're doing work than in the community at large. But they're not correlating or creating any correlation or causation between them. And I started raising questions in the first 3 months after we gave away our first dollar, asking for reports. Those questions have been continuing for 6 to 7 years, with no satisfactory responses to those. I was the chair of the committee for 4 years, and when I kept seeing these kind of results, I resigned about 1.5 years ago and said, I'm not going to be the chair of this committee anymore.
This is insane. A man whose family donated $5.4 million of their own money into these programs, not taxpayer money, their own personal money, is telling you that this doesn't work. He is not some political opponent. He's a donator, a believer, someone who put millions of dollars on the line because he wanted to help. And after 6 to 7 years of asking for reports, asking for evidence, asking for accountability, he got nothing, so he quit. And then there's this Northwestern study that the mayor and governor likes to wave around, the one that says crime went down in neighborhoods with the Peacekeepers. It sounds great until you read the fine print. The head of that very lab admitted that the study does not attempt to determine how much of that reduction in violence is due to the Peacekeeper program. Their own researchers said it's a likely of many factors. And oh yeah, by the way, Chicago Cred has donated $1.4 million to that same Northwestern lab. The organization that's being studied is funding the people studying it. You cannot make this up. So here's where Mayor Johnson and Governor Pritzker is going to push back. They're going to say that crime is at historic lows. And yes, the official numbers look decent, right? Violent crime in Chicago dropped to a decade-plus low in 2025. Homicides are down. Robberies are down. Carjackings are down almost 50%. They're going to go and point to these numbers and say, see, these programs are working. But here's what they're not telling you. That crime drop is happening everywhere, nationally, across every major city. The Council on Criminal Justice confirmed it. Nearly every large American city saw steep drops in violent crime. So Chicago isn't special. It's riding a national wave. So taking credit through the CVI funding is like putting on a raincoat and taking credit for the weather. And the second point, and this is very critical, there are serious questions whether Chicago's crime data is even accurate. When Chicago switched to the FBI's new reporting system back in 2021, a massive number of aggregated assaults simply stopped being reported to the state. The FBI recorded 499 homicides in Chicago in 2023. Chicago Police Department's own data, 617. That's 118 murders that vanished from the federal numbers. Gone. And the academics who study this data have warned, and I quote, the unreliability of the crime data makes it easy for the numbers to be run, so a result supports the narrative that's being pushed. Illinois has had decades-long issues reporting correct data to the FBI. And the third point, which I think should make everyone angry, I talked about this earlier, Mayor Johnson killed the ShotSpotter program back in September 2024. That was a gunshot detection system that automatically alerted police to gunfire, even when nobody called 911. He did this even when his own police superintendent and most of the aldermen and most of the residents wanted to keep it. And since he pulled the plug, CWB Chicago has been tracking what they called Brandon's bodies. 54 people found shot in the former ShotSpotter's areas where there were no 911 calls. No ShotSpotter alert, no 911 call. The shooting doesn't show up in the stats. And here's something else that nobody's talking about. Chicago Police Department is down roughly 1,700 officers compared to 2019. That means 52% of the high priority 911 calls had no squad car available to respond in 2023, up from 19% in 2019. When police can't show up, crimes don't get documented. When the crimes don't get documented, the numbers go down. The crime didn't disappear. The ability to measure it did. And that's the number they're putting up on the poster and calling progress. So let's put this all together. You got $1 billion spent on violence prevention programs in Chicago since 2017. You have a bunch of fake nonprofits, LLCs registering as podcasts and receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in violence prevention grants. You got a third of the peacekeepers just there for a check. And you got state audits finding taxpayer money being spent on the Apple Store, shopping sprees, and Costco vodka. And you got 29 peacekeepers arrested in 3 years, including one who took a picture with the governor 6 days before participating in a murder. Not good. It's a lot of problems. And the worst part of it all, you have crime stats that most people are saying don't reflect reality because of reporting failures, fewer police, and the elimination of the gunshot detection technology. In the middle of all this, the mayor of Chicago wants $100 million more. No accountability, no line items, no transparency, just give me money. Terrible, terrible situation, but we'll continue to follow this story. Check out the Free Press, the YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the description below. Let me know what you guys think about this story. Thank you for taking time to watch this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.